Hello.
Good morning.
Oh yeah, it is morning.
Well, yeah, gosh, I always forget time zones.
Yeah.
How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been, we saw Hamilton.
I saw that you was that the first time you saw it?
First time we saw it live. We've been enjoying the Disney Plus,
everyone.
but
Yeah,
it's an interesting, different experience. It was all amazing. Here is
it is
Peggy too.
pretty
Hi,
tremendous.
Peggy. Oh, hello.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Freddie. Oh, nice. Who's that?
This is Pixel.
Hi, Pixel.
He's very curious.
That's a good name.
It was it synced up oddly enough with like the launch of the Pixel phone, which I did not know about when I named him. So every year that the new Pixel comes out, I know how old he is. It's the Pixel 6 now. It's kind of nice.
Oh, that's cool.
How's it going, Mark?
Fine, busy. But yes. So I've been doing a lot of Tinderbox documentation and beta stuff this week.
I'm gonna send you an email afterwards, based on some of the things we chatted about last week.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So I'm just moving a pixel about here since you mentioned pixels. I have to figure out a way to actually, while we're waiting, and Fabian, we are planning, you guys are doing it in kind of a presentation today, right?
Yes, I have to excuse David for today because we're currently in a lot of pitches and calls with potential angel investors. And therefore, I'm here today, and I hope I can fulfill both roles in showing what we do with the Napkin and where we want to go, and maybe how we can connect it with visual meta in some way. I would suggest a demo of maybe 5 minutes. I don't want to use too much time, but it would be super interesting to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, as planned. I don't know who will be here today. It's always very random, but we are being recorded. So why don't we just talk general for a few more minutes and see if anyone else pops in, and then we dive in.
Cool, perfect.
Actually, I'm going to show this screen share thing here. So this is what Mark has been helping with. In Author currently, when you export, you have all kinds of options, and it's a bit messy. And also include visual meta, and there's a link. Okay, why would anyone go? That's interesting. It doesn't go to the visual meta page. I didn't know that. So we're trying to make it a bit cleaner for different ways. So, you can see this is very Photoshop mocked up. But we're trying to figure out what to put on the page to enable it so people may actually consider enabling it. And Mark, one of the thoughts is to make it this simple. Because, Mark and I, we've been doing examples of lots of text like this. So I've cropped the whole document to make it this. I don't know. What do you think, guys? Should it be, how can we, Raphael is joining us, very good.
I like the idea of keeping it brief. I almost need, if just putting on my customer hat, if I'm seeing something for the first time, this would not be enough to convince me that it's that I should hit the checkbox. And you probably don't want to, or maybe you do want to like auto check it off the bat, but something to talk about kind of the primary function of visual meta, even if it's just enabling citations across your document to others, might be a helpful sell to someone who's doing this.
We had a problem with it's a classic thing of everything trying to get above the fold and running out of space. And the problem is at one and the same time, you want to say, this is all this really cool stuff. And then you end up having to explain it because, of course, I raised exactly the same point. Yeah, so I'm coming to this new. My presumption is anything new is probably bad and dangerous, and I shouldn't touch it with a barge pole. So why am I going? Even if it's been pre-ticked for me, why should I do it? And one of the difficulties Fred also has at the moment is one of the really nice features is where being able to click on a citation and getting a sort of a little pop-up a bit like the pre-feed you get on a Wikipedia page where you hover over a link, and that similar sort of thing basically. But you can see your reference, so you can go through. You can be reading through something, and it happens to sit all the way to the end of an academic document. You click on a citation, you can see enough info. Say, oh right, I know what that is, or not, which is one of the primary things you're sort of doing with that sort of document. So yeah, the question is, well, what do you say that's going to convince someone? Bearing in mind they probably don't know whatever you say, that it's not going to be familiar to them. So you're either stuck with writing a very short essay, which they won't read because it's too long, or you just say, hey, it's really cool stuff, in which case the cynic in me says, no, not going to touch it. It's hard.
You could also use the buttons on the bottom right. Like you could have two buttons where the default blue button is with just continue, and then there's a gray button next to it that says continue with a limited PDF, and you have a little info icon next to that, where when you hover over the info icon, it tells you limited PDF doesn't have interactive meta information.
You are very sneaky.
Yeah, that's kind of a nice idea too.
I think that's super clever. Yes.
Position it as less than.
Yeah, that's very, very sneaky. I'm looking more and more forward to the napkin demo now, because you clearly know how to sell things.
I mean, it doesn't give people any disadvantages, does it? I mean, they can still use it like they would regularly do. They just have the option to do more with it. So therefore, I think it's not unfair. It's not like they have a disadvantage anyway.
That's good. No, you're pressing on the FOMO button, fear of missing out.
yeah, exactly. I mean, in 1 year or something, everything without visual meta is going to be limited and kind of outdated. So therefore, we already allow people to explore that.
Should we not call it visual meta here? Should we just call it enhanced PDF? And then we say what it is.
I think there may be alternate meanings of enhanced PDF already floating around outside there. Some of the workflow stuff, the enterprise stuff that people do with it, and there may even be a meaning for enhanced PDF. So I'd stick with visual meta. The ship has sailed. Visual meta's out there in the world for better or worse, and they can look that up. If they looked up these other terms, they'd probably end up being more confused.
Interactive PDF, advanced PDF.
I think interactive is better than enhanced or advanced, because enhanced or advanced, I would guess it's easier to print. It has a better resolution. It's more compressed, like something on the core of PDF.
So
visual meta enhanced.
Oh, there we go, Peter. You are here. Good.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think we're ready to go or to demo. But Fabian, the idea of changing the button, are you thinking of having two buttons? The one that is just normal, or because then we don't need this checkbox, do we?
I'm not sure whether you like it, but sometimes you have those two buttons where you say one button is the default button that is bottom right, and that's continue, and the other one is like the console button next to it that says continue with a limited PDF. The only thing you need then is an X on the top right to close the overlay, so people can get out of it if they want to get out of it.
So there will still be next. So that one will be publish as limited, publish as.
Now we're getting the two buttons meme.
Yeah, I'll think about that. I'm not sure yet.
Like in the old times when there was Windows help can't be found. Okay, cancel help. I mean, yeah. No.
And none of them helped at all.
Yes.
Red pill button and the blue pill button.
Okay, before we switch out of this, this kind of makes sense, but what should we call it? Advanced PDF, interactive PDF? You guys must have a really good idea for a good name. I'm going to have a glass of water and let you speak. No one has a strong opinion?
Visual meta enhanced PDF.
Yeah, but that's really long, because look here, we only have about this space, right? That's an issue with that.
Yeah.
And you could also do something like deep meta information, active meta information, enriched meta information. I mean, it's something about the meta information, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think actually not, despite the name. I think what may be interesting for users is the fact you can do more with it, not the fact that it has more in it. Or am I wrong?
Functional
Something like source connected. I mean, it's also connected to the sources.
Citable?
citation aware PDF.
That's funny.
Art PDF?
Where?
It does that sometimes. I'm not trying to ignore you, Peter. I'm just trying to kind of blandify the language. Anyway, you guys have been helpful. We'll keep thinking about this. I'm going to go back to the room and see who's here. Adam is here too. Excellent. Yeah, after the Fabian's presentation and after a chat around that, I have seen Vint's presentation for the 5th of November. So I'd like to show that to you guys and ask you, there are some ideas about how what we're doing might fit in there. Okay.
Do you want to do that on the recording in terms of we may be giving a spoiler to stuff that if he's showing it later?
Oh, I could yeah, no, I can clearly edit that bit out.
Okay.
Go back
Sorry,
to the
yeah, that's
discussion.
fine.
Yeah, no, good point. So Fabian, over to you, Mr. Napkin.
Thank you so much. If anything is too flat or too boring, let me know. I feel like I'm in a group of very sophisticated people in terms of how to handle text. So I'm very grateful to be able to show that to you. The problem that David and me saw is very, very kind of low level, you could say. We have a world where we're overwhelmed with loads of information, and we have a hard time, at least many people have a hard time, to collect this information from different sources and to see connections between different bits of information. And the kind of source problem we see there is that we have many media for information, like podcast is a media for information in some way, books are, and even the note-taking tools that we use, in our opinion, are media for information, because you can take information from one place and then put it to another place. But the note-taking systems usually don't help you to think. They don't help you. I mean, what is thinking? They don't really help you to see new connections between different notes you made. They don't help you to get in that state of inspired flow when you look at your notes. They kind of only help you to put them somewhere and see them again if you want to see them. And what we want to build is a medium for thought. So that's a medium to think actively, a medium to gain insight, to be inspired, and also to share thoughts. And what we hope to achieve is a world where it's way easier for many people to collect thoughts and to see those new connections themselves. And maybe just as a background, David and me are bootstrapping that. We worked at bigger companies for quite some time and currently use our savings to try and build this, because we want to have it for our own, and we think it might be helpful for other people as well. I'll guide you through a world where Napkin is already widely available. Currently, we have a prototype with roughly 100 users on it. This is a newsletter from James Clear. I imagine you already have your Napkin account. And of course, in 1 year, it's a natural thing that somebody who shares content with you doesn't only send you the monologue form as a text, they also send you a short link to the Napkin with the ideas that they share. So let's say James Clear here extracted the key thoughts from his newsletters in a cloud of thoughts. When you open the link, it looks like this. Maybe you're interested in habit formation, so you click the button of habits. It's a little laggy in screen sharing. Please excuse that. If you have it on your own computer, it's quite smooth. And you see thoughts from the texts that James Clear writes, and you always see thoughts that are connected to the one in the middle. So here we see improvement, change, habits, motivation. The thoughts around that are tackling some of the same topics. And you could also say, I just want to see more things on motivation. And you can see that cloud of thoughts move around and always arrange towards your currently focused topic or your currently focused thought. And the thoughts you like, you can save them with a little heart on them. You see, I already added quite a few thoughts to my account here. When I'm done with the James Clear, I can just close that one. Now I'm in my own cloud of thoughts, and in that one you see that I have thoughts from different sources. For example, here I see on decision making, I have something from Adventures in Life. That's another newsletter from Naval on Twitter. And let's say I want to see again more stuff from Naval. I click that link again, and then I see more thoughts are popping up in the background, so I can connect different clouds of thought and always see the connections in those clouds of thought around the topics. And again, you can also save stuff from there and add it to my own account. And the target of this is, if I'm interested in a certain topic and a certain question, I can always pull the thoughts up that I once collected towards this idea or this thought. And I can see those interesting connections between different sources. So if I have different sources on a certain topic, I can connect them with each other and see whether they support each other or whether they have some maybe conflict or interesting disparity there. And of course, I can also share my own Napkin account with other people. So if I have a new colleague or something, I could select a few thoughts and say, hey, this might be interesting for you. You can have a look. And currently, this is a prototype. Currently, people label the thoughts themselves with tags. In future, obviously, we want to work more with NLP there. We're currently implementing that. So we want to see the connections between different thoughts automatically without that manual work. And also what's in there is the spaced repetition algorithm. So it always shows you thoughts that you didn't see in a long time. And thereby we hope to help people to keep in focus what they like. And if you don't like something anymore, you can just send it to the archive. So you still have it, but it's not in your view anymore. So it would be super interesting to get your ideas, your impressions, your thoughts on that. Also critical, like what you think we're missing, what's not working, anything.
Sorry, I did the muted thing. It does look very impressive. There's no question about that. Can you talk a little bit about how things, a little more about how things are connected and interactive, like just showing how you can do things?
Of course. First, I mean, we're sometimes discussing theory as well here. So the whole thing is a physical simulation, which has forces and charges. So you can think about it like planets or like electrons, whatever you prefer in this direction. They attract each other when they have some of the same topics, and they repulse each other a little bit to make space. And the whole cloud, like down here, you see some kind of island around a certain topic. It is always arranged from the center. And we want it to look a little bit more like islands in the sea, so it's a bit more splattered around, but we're currently working on that. And how can I actually do things? When I add a thought, I first see I can only clarity is focus, and that's one from Harari. And when I now start connecting that thought with others, let's say, I think it's with learning somehow, and I think it's also with clarity, then I see the network already arranging towards what I'm currently typing. And as soon as we got more NLP in there, that should also happen while I'm typing. So it should always be in a communication and interaction with me. And I could also add, I forgot to mention that earlier, there's always the source links to where the stuff comes from. So we want to connect the long form content by extracting the insights from it. And I can also, I mean, you asked what can I do with it? Obviously, I can also just search for stuff. I can download stuff, manage my thoughts, merge text, rename text. That's kind of hygiene functions, or look at my archive and pull back stuff that I've sent there or delete completely.
Is it possible to export data sets? Yes.
What many users do is they have a certain tag where they want to write an article about. They insist, in this case, I want to write something about habits. Then I can download TXT, CSV, JSON, or anything to start building on that. And funny side fact, we asked our users what's the best format to export. And they said PDF. I would have never thought that they would say PDF, but PDF was the answer. So that's a lot of you people who don't work with kind of data stuff. They just work with the content.
No, I
And
want
I printed.
JSON or YAML so that I can massage it programmatically.
Sorry, I didn't fully get that.
I want JSON or YAML so I can massage it programmatically.
Yeah, of course. That's why Jason isn't here. Like Jason was the first one we put that in.
I have a question. So looking at this, are you just, so you have a central, obviously the focus at the moment is the idea of the thought in the middle, and a number of other ones are surfaced around. Is that how is the number of those? Does that mean anything, or is it they're just the ones that are closest? I mean, could it be 10 things, or is it one outer ring thing? How does that work?
It's calculated by different things. First, by your screen size. If your screen gets bigger, it just shows you more thoughts. If it gets smaller, it shows you less thoughts. It always shows you the thoughts that you didn't see in a long time. So if you click it again, you kind of loop the system. And also, sometimes it only shows you two. If it says there's only two tightly connected, it only shows you two.
Yeah, and I like this sort of making things move away into the background. It's something we've been discussing, looking at some of the visualizations Adam's done with sort of data here in this sort of group, and this idea of, it's tremendously powerful having it sort of the idea that it's there is important.
Yes.
But it's not detracting from your concentration on the actual task at hand. So I like that.
Yeah, we also thought about how the human mind works, and often it works like most fluently in looking at nature. And in nature, you have all this kinds of movement and swarms, and we try to foster that state of mind that goes in the direction of flow and intuition. And therefore, we wanted to build something like that. And we want to have it more organic. Like currently, it's a little bit too crowded here, but that's the direction we want to go. Other ideas, comments, feedbacks, things we should build, things we are on the wrong path.
I want to hear what Adam has to say.
Well, I wrote down some things. One problem I have with tools is that the theory is that they get more useful with more information in them. But usually whenever I hit 1,000 items or more, they start to degrade in quality. They turn out less useful for me. So I think the idea of archiving, but also what we've talked about here, highlighting some things, push them to the front. You have those hearts, but I guess those are kind of imported things, or are they your favorite things in your cloud? No. So I imagine that some sort of star where you push things forward could be useful. And also there is a middle ground between, for the kind of a repetitive or what did you call it?
Space repetition.
Space repetition system. That middle ground, instead of just archiving it, is to snooze things for a while. So I don't want to see this. So you click the snooze button, and if the more you click the snooze button for a thing, the longer it stays away. So if you click it the first time, it will remind you in a week, and the next time maybe in a month or a year or in 10 years. So you have that option as well. So that could be a way of not archiving things, but being reminded, but in the future, but not just now. So that was some thoughts.
Yes,
and
thanks a lot.
I had to do a family thing here, so I may have missed the answer here.
No, all good.
The different islands here, I see things far out, and is that because they are unrelated, or the small islands, or in the background, in the faded background, do they represent anything, or is it more?
Yes, I'll start at the beginning. I heard three separate things. The first thing, does it degrade when there are more thoughts in there? Currently, I'll be honest with you, when you hit 250, it gets slower. And that is something we said when the first user hits the 200 mark, we're going to solve that problem because it's technically solvable. It's just in the current state of code. It's not super smooth afterwards. Using the archive, yes, that helps people to keep their knowledge network kind of clean with what they currently think is important. There is even a few users who describe that as working memory. Everything they read, they find, they shoot into this. Then they archive whatever they think is not relevant anymore. And they give a tag to things they think are super important. And then they export everything around the tag and send it to their, let's say, Obsidian and start writing there. So they have kind of a flow of thoughts that they can easily. One of those users calls it inspiration collider. So he always says he lets things collide in here. And yes, and that is one way. Then the other thing on rating more important, less important stuff. I like the idea of the relative evaluation, like not the stars, but the snooze or maybe show me again soon function. We don't currently have that in there. We think about an interface that shows up below the thoughts that also gives you the possibility to do certain kind of small challenges. It could be something like when you log into the system, down here on the bottom right, it says you have 7 thoughts that don't have connections to any other thought. Then you press start and then you loop those. And then you can add tags, or it could tell you you've seen all your thoughts in the last 10 days, but there's 5 you didn't see. You say, okay, show those. And that way we could go into some kind of a less aimless interaction. So people can feel like they kind of take care, like in the old times when you had a Tamagotchi or something, or when you have a pet that tells you what it needs, and then you can take care of your thoughts. And that was the second, the last point. You asked about the layout, how is it generated on the outer edges here. Currently, we say this is the center, so it's kind of hop 0, like you start hopping there. Then you have some hop 1 nodes that are connected with those tags, so they have some of those tags. From the hop 1 nodes, like the most closely related ones, we select the ones that you didn't see in a long time, show them in a readable mode, that are those. And then the smaller they get, the further away they are. And if they wouldn't be connected at all anymore, they would be somewhere on the outer corner. So in this network, we see everything is connected in some way. And if I click something like very small here, let me see whether I can hit it. That one jumps to the middle, and the whole thing shuffles and kind of warps in a different shape.
And will it look the same if I click it again? Will it appear the same, or is it a new view every time?
It's always a different view, because it always has new information, because it knows what you've seen that you didn't see, that you haven't had seen when you looked at that thought the last time. And some users have a hard time with that. We usually send them to some mind map tools, because I mean, they are great as well. But the users who want to see those new connections, they like it this way better. Currently, we don't even have a way back, like a backwards function in there, because we try to be very kind of agnostic around that idea as long as possible.
So it isn't correct to see this as a kind of a 3-dimensional or 2-dimensional space, but something else, I guess.
You could call it an n-dimensional auto-generating mind map or something like that, because it always kind of has all connections and tries to find the ones most important for you.
Is it possible to put images in here, or is...
Not at the moment, because we want to go in the direction of NLP pretty fast, and to get there fast, it's easier to work the text first. But we might need some time.
Can you import from Anki?
Currently, you can't import from Anki, but if you personally want to do that, just send me a message in any way, and we will do that. There's a TSV import in there, and therefore I'm pretty sure it's possible. Also, people ask for readwise integration. We currently don't do that, because we see better usage in people who start anew selecting their most important thoughts, and not just kind of dump the whole archive and then hope it's going to be magical in some way. I didn't see the hand sequence. I go with Peter, because Peter didn't say anything by now. Thanks.
Also, do you have a notion of explicit dimensions that you can associate thoughts with? Since you mentioned n-dimensional, and you have some sort of multi-dimensional scaling algorithm buried in there somewhere.
currently the only explicit information that is stored in the database is around a certain thought, the tags that the thought has, and the dates when you've seen it. And everything else is generated while you're like opening it here. So the only explicit thing you can currently do is the tags. And I mean, obviously the source URL, but that's not demanding. And like if you look at NLP and the vectors in n-dimensional space that define the kind of characteristic of the content, that is generated with some pre-trained model that we're currently testing, but is not even stored in the database. I'm not sure that answered the question, Peter. Was it something a little bit different?
Well, also, can you relate tags to each other so that you can indicate that one tag is a broader term or a narrower term than another?
No, not at the moment. We have a few users who want to do that, and they are usually the users that worked with PKM tools before. They feel the urge to build those hierarchies and kind of those defined systems. Users who didn't have PKM systems before, they usually don't have the urge because they start feeling they don't really need that because they have an evolving, emerging system of tags, and it always changes, it always develops, and therefore they don't want to build those static systems so much. And I think in a world that becomes more complex, a more emerging and more dynamic system is at least more comfortable. But it's a hypothesis. I wouldn't say that it's wrong to do so, but it's the hypothesis we build on.
Have you taken a look at description logics? Have you taken a look at description logics?
Description logics in what I know in terms of this direction, what I guess is taxonomies, ontologies, anything like that, or is it something else?
Related to ontologies. Let's see. I'll
yes,
find
yes.
I'll give you a link for it in a minute.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we looked at that and we decided against it because we didn't find a smooth way to include it without having to explain it to the users. And we want to make something that's really super easy for everyone. But it might only be our bad in not explaining it in a very easy way.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks. I was just something that sort of wrapped through my brain as sort of Adam was talking earlier, which when he was talking about sort of in a sense sort of snoozing things or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking there's another aspect of that same problem, which is the sort of the mismatch between effectively the looseness that code can achieve, or or the limit of the looseness.
Yes.
And the plasticity of our thoughts. So it's the kind of thing. So here we are, we're trying to find the piece of paper that was on our hand yesterday. And so things are coming up and one might want to sort of, in a sense, just back them away. So you're not saying it's the same as a snooze, but slightly different. I was saying, yes, thank you for that, but that's not the thing I'm looking for at the moment. It is linked to this, it is part of this, but it's that sort of subtlety where you almost want to, I suppose in a way, what one's mentally doing is you're almost playing with the weightings between of the linkages between items. So and especially where you have this nice layout here where we're not being deluged with a vast amount of things. So it's this thing of how whether there's a way that's even possible to sort of, in a sense, to push something back out into the outer ring without in any way sort of. So you're not making a negative against it. What you're actually saying in your mind's eye, yes, this is wonderful, but not just now.
Yeah,
and it's not. So yes. it's a latering in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yes. Frode, I'll answer that last, so we don't steal too much time here. But this whole thing of
don't rush. This is interesting. I have a few questions myself.
Okay, cool. Then I'm happy. Yeah, just good, perfect. Then Mark. I think the whole space that we're seeing here currently in our interpretation of thinking is the space of this serendipity and this kind of looseness where you can push stuff back, but we don't that much see it in here. And the solution to this problem might be something that we call stacks. We say if you want to work on a certain project or write a certain article, for example, you could have a mode where you drag something to the right and then there appears a panel that at the beginning has the title like your next stack, and then you can drag thoughts on there, and that behaves like the pinboard. So it has a two-dimensional static layout of the thoughts, and you can move them around. And then I hope it would mitigate the need to push stuff away because you would just kind of press kind of the shuffle button again and say, okay, this is not interesting. Ah, yeah, that might be. Let's take this. And then that static area would be the pinboard, and in the pinboard you can export, you can write whatever is connected to a more static way.
No, that's interesting. No, thank you. I mean,
Yeah.
one other extensional thought to that is that the pinboard itself is in effect a similar display, but with a deliberately
Yes.
closed environment. So it's almost,
Yes.
I can reach into the soup of things. So I'm going to take
Yes, exactly.
a lot, I'll put them on a separate board. So that, in other words, I'm essentially saying anything that's not here is not unimportant, but it's not pertinent to the task at hand.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting idea, but I really enjoyed seeing this. Thanks.
It's a focus area. Adam, before we go to Frode.
I wonder about the history here. You said that you can't really go and navigate back to the immediate board because it always changing here. But is there some sort of indication which card you've seen in this session, or some sort of? It would be interesting to just, I guess, most user would like to see the cards that were a moment ago to go back to that one, even if the view changes in some way. If you go back, I see the value of coming back to the card, so you can peek into a new view and then go back at least one step just to the.
Yes.
So that's one question. Yeah, let's start with that one, maybe.
Thank you. Then I don't have to remember so many. Thanks. Yeah, there's one way currently that is a bit of a sneak way. When you press search, you see the cards that you've seen last. So this is just the stream of things you've seen. So you can say, I've just been there, and then you go back to that one. And at some point, we're probably also going to have the back and forth modus. Yeah. And the orientation about what you've seen in the session, we don't currently have it because we didn't see a good way. We would like to have it as well, but we don't want to, I don't know, put a dot on that or something. We can't use opacity because we already used opacity, and therefore we just skipped it at the moment to keep it clean, but I think we'll have it at some point.
So before, I know Peter's got to go and Brendan's got things, but for context, can you talk a little bit about who the users are and what they would use it for? Because currently I see mostly nice and useful quotes. So is it kind of like a special card library of quotes viewer, or if it's ideas, how does that idea-wise work? Is it basically a mechanism where the tags are providing the spatial relationships? Or, but anyway, sorry, I'm digging into it in irrelevant detail. My question is, who would use it and why, just to help us focus on this?
Okay. All people who currently consume content, and in a more narrow way, who consume content that's already kind of applicable. Like we have science, then we have application of science, and a lot of podcasts do a really good job in distilling what people could use in their own life or could use in some kind of project. But then when they are in their own life or when they are in that project, they usually don't remember what they've heard, what they've read, what they've seen. And this gap that we want to bridge, because we think if people could think about what they thought was important in an easier way, without having that high friction mode of going to some device, writing it down, and then opening that again, searching for stuff, that could make many people more successful and happier, because they have probably less of that information overwhelm problem if they have an easy and comfortable space to like iterate on those thoughts that they've had. Does it make sense? And maybe in what do they use it for? Currently, we see writers that collect ideas, also comedy writers, a few left finally, and that want to have different ideas in context.
Yeah, no, that's good. Peter, since you have to go, and Brendan.
Okay, can you bookmark the current display so you can get back to it or show it to someone else? And also, have you considered using it in your software development workflow? One thing I notice is that lots of times I'll be constantly surveying libraries that provide code that I might potentially use at some point in the future. So I could imagine this display only with NPM modules instead of thoughts, so that I could be reminded in a few months that I saw something that can generate high data density QR codes that are optimized for being captured by cell phone cameras on the fly, or there's a library that provides a description logic reasoner that I might have seen 2 years ago, and it would be nice if periodically it would flash those software libraries at me. So I could see it being very useful to developers who have this huge flood of potential tools that we could use, potential libraries that might make sense in our code, and to get reminded of those periodically to jog your memory.
Yeah, perfect. Can you bookmark something? Currently, we don't have a specific button for that, but we have a few users who use a certain tag. One user has a tag that's called My System, and everything she thinks is kind of the most epic insights in her whole network, she adds the tag, and then she loops the tag in the morning before she goes to some appointment, and she has those on top of her mind again. Kind of a workaround. Probably we'll have some other button for that at some point. And the other question, do we use it for development? No, but it's a nice idea. Thank you. We probably will. Brody, I think Brennan. Yeah, okay, yes, Brennan.
Hey, first off, visually wonderful. I very much like the aura that's presented as I'm looking upon the idea of past thoughts.
Thank you.
That's very pleasant. I may have missed this, but I have a few questions and comments.
Sure.
Can I comment or write on any of these thoughts or this view that's presentable? Is there a position for me to do so and then track that?
Currently, we don't have comments. We might have it at some point. Currently, when you collected a thought from somebody else and you want to write something around that thought, then you create a duplicate, and then you add your own thoughts on that, and then you just save it in your own account. But I think something like commenting would be reasonable. Yes.
Yeah, or an annotation, a margin note.
Yes.
Something that might resurface. Typically, when I'm in a situation where I'm reviewing old notes or resurfacing, I'm in the retrieval process.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the spark of inspiration to actually write is.
Yes.
So that is a moment that I'd want.
Yes, some people add a new thought to that, and then they add the tags towards that. What we also want to do is create kind of follow-up thought on this. So if you press the button and then you press another one, you create a thought that is automatically linked with the one that you were building on. So you could build your own continuing network of ideas. Yeah, because awesome. I love that you're thinking about that. The piece that Adam was talking about, I believe it was Adam, a little bit around like the alternate views, or being able to provide yourself with an overview of what you've seen. Yes. Those key moments that I come across that are the eureka moment, those are kind of the things that I would like to traverse back through as well. So, and that's a hidden feature we want to do as well. At some point, it will show your timeline down here. When you press the timeline, all the thoughts are flowing to a horizontal axis, and you see when you added them, and you maybe also see when you interacted with many of them, and then you can dive into a certain time frame and say, okay, at that point of time, I've first seen the connection between those two thoughts, or I added a certain tag that afterwards exploded. And that would be funny in interaction as well. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see some aspects of the trails that you've gone on to kind of weave through past thoughts. Very last kind of comment question here. Can I make connections between tags? So I see that you've made some cuts in some of your tags, like what I'm looking at right now, awareness and perception. Maybe I've been doing some thinking around that. Can I have a view where those two tags are selected and I'm only presented with anything that is tied in with both of those? I like the idea a lot, and we definitely want to do that. We just didn't do it by now. What we imagine is a mode where you select them, and a 3-dot menu maybe on the tag, and then we'll put a frame around your current interface, put some lines in the back so you see it's kind of a sub-selection, and on the inside of that sub-selection you only see stuff with one of those 2 tags. It could also be a way that you maybe even have 2 of those spaces next to each other that you can handle separately. I think that something like this is reasonable. Yeah, there's definitely neat foundational structure here for the retrieval process and to kind of resurface old notes. So I'm definitely a fan there. That's it. I'll step away for now, but very cool visually. Brandon, thanks a lot. If you have any ideas on top, or just if anyone just want to have an account to test it, just let me know and we'll create accounts for you. Currently, there's hundreds of people on the wait list, but we only do 10 to 20 accounts per week because we want to talk with everyone. But I mean, we are already talking, so if you want one, just let me know.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. At the moment, that seems to be it. That leaves us with another 15 minutes to kind of round off the general call without and looking at this. And I'm super happy if you have any additional ideas, just let us know. Like I said, we're working on this full time at the moment, and we are talking to people who like the idea as well and want to support it in any way. The nice thing is that there's also a few coders who already want to work on this as well, like especially NLP people. So that's kind of promising for the next steps.
One
Frode,
more
thank you very
question.
much.
Sorry.
Yes.
Can I apologize? Is there any like automation or workflows that are built into the tool in terms of kind of pushing yourself through a review process?
Yes.
Or is that really just kind of arriving at the page?
Not right now. What we are currently building next week is something we call stray thoughts. The stray thoughts will be the ones that don't have any connection. They'll have a white circle around them. So in the zoomed out layout, you will see that there's something that has kind of a dot. And then there's going to be a mode that guides you through connecting your network with the stray thoughts. The next thing will be thoughts you didn't see in a long time. You'll see a time stamp that shows you in what duration have you seen all your thoughts. And it might be an interesting thing for people to kind of always work on keeping this duration, like you've seen all your thoughts in the last 91 days, small. So they might have a feeling, I always want to see all my thoughts in the last 30 days, and then they can start looping to keep the number small and always have them in their mind. But that's a very good question, because currently it's quite aimless. It's like a white paper and you can play with it, but it doesn't have this aim in that gamification.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have one more thought, and it's not, I mean, it's not so defined as I think this should be a feature or something, but I love the serendipity aspect of this. But one of the things I often find with any sort of tool like this, I'm always thinking about one of the things is finding the anti-patterns. So it's what are the things that sort of I sense ought to be connected but aren't. But what's always difficult is to actually foreground that. You sort of you know they're in there, and you know there are holes where you think there shouldn't be, but it's quite difficult to see the holes. You can see the not holes much more easily. You can see the holes. I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I think this is an interesting sort of way of presenting information.
Definitely, that's a different discussion. That's the white spot, blind spot, and kind of curiosity, irritation horizon discussion. Like different people have different horizons of where their curiosity ends and where their irritation begins. And we have the long-term aim to have a global inspiration graph of thoughts that we can use to irritate users right on that horizon of where they're still curious.
I like the curiosity horizon. That's a nice term. Yes.
That is a very nice term indeed. We don't have that much time. Let's go a little bit over to this other presentation, because the way that I plan to make it, I actually think quite fits well with what we just discussed, and how visual meta could fit in this environment. So I'm now going to pause the recording for a bit. So just brief summary, I paused there because there was someone else's presentation, but we're looking at how, instead of doing huge amount of data stuff, maybe we can go from author type environment via a defined concept into other defined concepts that have been encoded in visual meta. And maybe we can also somehow interact with implied concepts in that type of environment. Over. There should be some whiz bang at the end of it, is what I'm trying to say.
So the focus of this is how to, while there's still time, what can be added to the presentation?
Yeah, a little bit of that. And Fabian just showed a really good demo of Napkin that was particularly visually. See you later, Peter. Thanks for coming today. You know, one of the neat things might quite simply be, these are concepts. Concepts should be quite transferable to Napkin, right? So a concept is not a tag in the sense of this environment. A concept is a tag that has a definition.
Yes.
So as long as you have two fields in whatever you're building, it can be a glossary. or concept?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to put that in Napkin, we could just add a data field for the labels. Currently, they have content and ID, and then there could be a description. And if I don't get concept wrong, the description would transfer from a tag to a concept. And then the easy thing to show the concept would currently be a tooltip. Like when you hover over it, you see the little black box over it, and that explains what it is. Maybe that's interactive and has a URL to somewhere, like if the concept is also not defined even further on Wikipedia or something, that would be possible. I'm just not sure about the level of sophistication that you have between the relations, whether they have strengths or different kinds of relations. We currently don't have that in Napkin.
Well, the thing is different tools for different thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So we're not trying to build a universal sharing mechanism for everything, but that you can get more than the basic tip of the iceberg literally across. So if someone is working an author and they get, oh, no, I need to do a Napkin, right? Or if they're reading something, they come across someone's defined concept. It's like, hang on, this is a really interesting concept. I want to put it in a Napkin. You know, what does that mean? That's the kind of thing we're talking about, right? And vice versa. It's like, I'm in Napkin. Actually, I want to add this to my paper.
Yeah, so some kind of connection there, some kind of APIs that I can use to send thoughts to a paper that I'm currently writing in. I don't fully get the user flow. Sorry, I'm losing some context there.
First of all, the technical thing would be the same as copying from reader as a citation. So it copies the selected text plus all the visual meta, BibTeX, and all of that stuff. And that can have as many fields as we need. In terms of the user group, you know, I'm still trying to focus in on your exact user group. In author, it's primarily students, either full-time university students or someone who's just a student in a field, you know, a knowledge person. So the idea is that people are trying to learn. What is learning? Learning is latching onto stuff you already know. You know, there has to be some kind of a map to some extent, right? And that's why if you have the opportunity to think in different spaces, like in a traditional mind map or concept map, that's fine. What you're doing, what author provides on the map, some of it should be transferable and not just through some boring import, export the whole thing and give up. But you should take a piece of knowledge, do something as simple as a copy and paste it in, as that, you know, here it is as well. Because in author, it's primarily, I am trying to make a knowledge product. I'm trying to make a document, which is different from trying to build a graph, not a graph, but a space that you have.
Well, your concept map is effectively a set of nodes and edges. I mean, it can be saved and described and moved in those terms, could it not?
Adam, what do you think of this, as in what you are thinking about and building? Do you like the idea of a concept being a first-class object / glossary term?
Yeah, very much so. After our last discussion, also the email I sent a few of you after the last time, regarding a bit inspired by Alan's point, what the pain points of text are, the pain points of text that we take for granted, that we assume comes with text that may not be true. It may not be true that it really comes with text, but our current technologies of text and definitions and concepts are really one of those things. Often when we write, we are asked in academic settings to define our terms and be precise in our language, but it takes so much space, visual space, or so much text. So I imagine that would be served very well as a kind of a an overlay or in the early web, we had those dotted links where you could hover over text and you get the definition, not a link, but similar to link. So I would imagine that many of our text would really benefit from having those definitions or precise terms defined, but not as inline text, but as text that could be brought in on demand by the reader. So I really would like to, for example, whenever I see Frode, I could get those definitions, or when I see a technical term or a philosophy term or something, I could get that precise definition and the exact sense of the word, because I really miss having a way of expressing the sense I'm referring to, the language sense of a word. But you can't always, for every word, you can't write out that sense. It would be, the text would be 10 times as long. So I would like to, for key terms, I would like to really put the sense in there somewhere in the background. So anyone who's unclear of what I mean would hover over the slightly more blue word or something and just see that which sense I'm referring to. Because so many of the discussions we have as humans is so much about term confusion and being irritated that someone else is using a term slightly wrong or using a different definition. By actually declaring more of our definitions, we would really solve a lot of speaking past each other. So
I agree. And before Mr. Allen jumps in, just wanted to mention later today, I will be interviewing Ted Nelson about this. He's doing an expert interview thing, which is, for my PhD, which I'm very grateful for. I don't have ethics approval yet, but, seriously, I've known Ted for decades. But the other thing is I also had a good conversation with Bruce Horn yesterday. He's the guy who wrote the first Finder for the first Macintosh. He's been working in NLP, natural language processing, for decades. And we talked about these implicit concepts and stuff. And he said, he knows very well the kind of chain of logic and programming. And, we're going to look at something we may be able to do as a group. So it's been a very inspirational week for that. And when you're talking about this kind of, let's call it context, Adam, which of course is a very hip word in our circles. When I'm teaching Edgar things, there's one thing to teach him a word. It's also important to teach him that the word means very different things depending on who is saying it, why it's said, and so on. So our ultimate goal, I think we all agree, is that when you're reading something, you can call up definitions, plural, of course. So they should be from the glossary, of course. If the author stated something explicit, which may be a lie, it may be correct, but that's one. Another one is something generated from that field, something from the corpus. Maybe someone talks about spatial hypertext and they speak about it incorrectly. That should be extractable as well. So I think we're absolutely on the same journey here, but I can't be on a very long call today, which is horrible. But just wanted to highlight that, and over to you, Alan.
Thanks, Frode. And Adam, apologies for my email response. I was at 2 in the morning. I read it afterwards and I said, "Hey, Adam, thanks, Adam." And I was just like, wait, what? Obviously, I wasn't fully there. On the topic of implicit concepts or context, I'm in full agreement, and I'll go ahead and do a Mott and Bailey and say that I think that graphs will discover are fundamentally the wrong metaphor for what we're trying to surface with text. It's close, but it's going to wind up being almost too problematic. But it's close. So I'm going to try and explain a situation that should be possible that I think graphs actually make more difficult. But maybe there's a way around this. So let's take the word hyperbolic. It has two major connotations. One in math, as in versus parabolic, and then one in speech, as in hyperbole or speaking to extremes. I could use that word then hyperbolic, and it could be linked to all kinds of concepts. But what would be important to me is that if I was reading something about Steve Jobs and there is a node connecting to connection to hyperbolic, there would be intelligence to say, because you're coming from Steve Jobs and now you're looking at hyperbolic, I believe that you mean it in this sense. And so I'm going to show you other things like political rhetoric, other terms that have to do on the speech side. And maybe there's a way to still get to the math side because maybe you want to explore that connection, but that path or that braid or whatever it is, I think needs to be far more easy and maybe a first-class citizen, and maybe something that it's not even about, like, you know, if I said that, someone would be like, well, you can already do that. You can just add a relation to the vector, you know. That's too difficult. That's another data field or something, right? One thing that I've been playing with in Readwise is I've been trying to tag things is, instead of tagging a concept that it's attached to, tag the kind of relation, right? So sometimes it'll just be this versus that, right? So I'm implying, hey, I've tagged this as something that should be compared to an opposite. And ideally what I would like is a shorthand that is maybe prepends with VS, you know, and then something in parentheses that could be the opposite. So it's really just a placeholder. Maybe it ties to something else in the article, or maybe it's just a reminder for myself that here's a concept, and I want to remember that it's the opposite of this concept, but only within this context per se, you know? I don't know if that makes sense. I'm stretching, it'd be easier to draw it out, but that's what I wanted to mention. And that's what I'm personally trying to explore.
So are you talking about kind of link types for concept connections?
I'm talking about a freedom of link types, a variety of link types that you don't have to do come up with the term every time, you know, like related to, but some sort of shorthand. I mean, similar to, I don't know, for whatever reason, I think of it in terms of CSS and how you can make a class. That's too complicated to go into now. But not everything is direct connection. Some things are only connections within the context of something else. And that should be easy to see as a first-class citizen in a graph.
Just to comment a little bit, and I see, Brendan, you have your hand up too, but and so the approach we have in author, which my advisor, Dave Millard, calls defining by writing. There's something, you know, it's just this is. If you combine that with the NLP stuff for implicit things, you should be able to take someone's written concept and analyze that. So if someone says this is the opposite to, the system should understand that. And maybe it should even tokenize it visually on the screen when the user is interacting with it. And that should then be able to go into the graph so that the user can, no, hang on a second, that is not what I meant. Because that the explicit meaning has been interpreted and is either correct or not, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you just write it, you know, flow of thoughts from your head. System says, is it so and so? And next step, right?
It's certainly possible, but the way that even that implies I'm going to do a focused query, and that's different than the passive exploratory sense that we might use a graph in Rome or Obsidian, where I still want to see what it is that I don't know that I've connected to, but now I want to do it. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking. Got a couple other hands up.
Okay, yeah, Brendan.
It is. Around this concept, you guys are really talking about something that is near and dear. The idea that we each have our own mental models, and conceptually as a designer, we need to kind of create a shared conceptual model for us to live in. That's really difficult for a number of the reasons of communication, and the idea of having almost a this is going to kind of bastardize the idea, but a personalized dictionary in a way that does contextualize your concepts and the way that you use them in different forms is a really nice way to think about when you see the word hyperbolic and you think, well, Jobs meant this, but Freud means this when he says the same thing, then I can start to construct a visual of what a more shared perspective is between all of us. And so that's very high level and theoretical, but there is an idea of bringing this into the idea of a concept map where there might be a definition of what this person meant by this word in this situation. And that's quite intriguing. And while the graph might not be kind of the best idea of that, there is kind of an added dimension that comes in when Adam's ideas are explored compared to Mark's ideas or my ideas. And I can start to see a little bit of a, it's almost like I'm wading through a, the fog of war of trying to understand what is being said right here. So there's, just to summarize that entire concept is, if I can see what I mean by what I say when I say a specific word, and Mark can see what I say as he's reading through kind of my notes or my PDF, whatever it might be, he's going to have a better idea of what I'm saying. And he can then kind of position this in his own mind when he's writing his own thoughts or expanding on his thesis, that he can call on kind of the provenance of where I got my concept from, where that definition kind of stems from, and what context it might mean for whatever story he's trying to tell. That's a little fuzzy in my head, so it probably sounds fuzzy to all of you as well, but there is an aspect of like defining concepts individually that could be brought to this, that could do kind of a world of work for what Vince's talking about.
But I mean, fuzziness is good, because one of the things that actually echoed to me listening to Alan was that I just had the same sense of unease. The closer I track to a hard edge system, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, now I'm losing what I almost think that was the focus, that little fuzzy edge that allows me to sort of draw a new line across the system that the system doesn't know about yet. I want to put undefined things into it, which a hard edge system, something that's built on one and zeros, that is inherently difficult, because it doesn't have an uncertainty module as such, or you even have to make that a program too. So I very much get, I think, where Alan's coming from in terms of your graphs being close, but it's almost as if what you begin to see is that there is an unintentionally restrictive element of formalism about it, which is not deliberate. It's an artifact of the tool, of the method. So it's not a bad thing in that someone deliberately put a bad thing in there. It's an inherent constraint of and so it doesn't give us quite the looseness and the nuance we perhaps want. But I also love this idea of being able to tie something to the context, because in the same way, when Brendan was speaking just now, I was thinking, I often find, because I do sort of community support for some PKM products, and a lot of the time I'm constantly establishing context, not so much in this is what my thinking is, but just saying, when I say this, I'm not being critical, I'm talking about a factual point rather than making a sort of a binary judgment about something, which I find in this area tends to be rather important to stay up front before you find yourself in another firefight, quite unintentionally. But it sort of speaks to the same thing. You're saying, yes, no, I'm establishing the context. I'm establishing that I'm not trying to start an argument. I'm trying to actually draw out a nuance. So I guess what I'm saying is I know that I'm almost doing this daily, my writing, admittedly in a slightly odd edge case of what you described, but no, I definitely recognize that.
And awesome. Thank you both. It's also not a difficult problem to address. It doesn't mean solve, but to make a slight improvement, because we see it in programming. I mean, it's almost as if we thought of tags as if they were recursive functions. Here's the tag plus this input. I still want that tag to be recognized as an entity. But I also know that there's this input, and if that matches something else, then that maybe becomes a stronger link or a different kind of link. So I do think it can be vastly improved. It just hasn't been looked at closely enough. Anyway, sorry I was late.
Don't be sorry. That's kind of the whole benefit of this thing. We come and go as we can. So lots of philosophical directions we're going in here, but is there anything we can actually make which would have a bit of a whiz bang at the end, or should we really try to keep this very, very simple? This presentation, I could do it as simple as somehow embedding a link to what Adam has already built. Or is there, I would like lots of things to happen on the screen to impress people, because at this point, the work we're all trying to do together in different aspects, a little bit of whiz bang helps, a little bit of showmanship helps. Look at Fabian just now. They're very good at going out there, talking to angels, very good pitch. They know what they're doing. We can't just be saving the world here, because if we try to save the world without this getting into the world, we're not saving the world, we're just having a chat. So we should try to do both, right, guys?
Well, while you're doing that, I just thought it's not really I don't have a solution as such, but I think one thing to perhaps play up and try and sort of give more life to it is this sense of sort of humans in the loop. Because one of the things I saw immediately is the slides sort of go by and someone's doing, kind of three-dimensional statistical analysis of what the word if means in Shakespeare. And it's all fine and well and good, but it's a very hard-edged, code-centric approach. It's basically trying to deconstruct all the complexity and the wonder of human language in a very deterministic way. I mean, it's not meant that way, but people are doing what they can. And I just keep coming back to this thing of the human in the loop. And one of the things, and so the thing is, how do we foreground that? I guess is the nub of it. Because I think it is really important to keep pushing that, because it's easy. We sit at a time at the moment when people are increasingly convinced that everything to put our money into is AI, and AI will solve everything, and it will get better, but I don't think it will solve everything. And one of the inherent problems of having the new wunderkind of AI is that it just sucks the life out of everything else. And so having some shoulders to wheel of the idea of us humans actually having some useful input and dealing with all these messy edges, and just like the aspect that Alan's just described, this fact of when a tag is not quite a tag, because we instinctively understand that as humans, and you can sort of see where you code it, but you end up doing an awful lot of structure just to get something we do in a snap of the eye like that. So that's, I suppose, if I had a thought as to sort of directional context, that I think is a good place to put some whiz bang. Quite what it would be, I don't have an immediate sort of answer.
Of course, by whiz bang, that to me sounds like interface or demo, which implies work on Adam's part. So that is a consideration. If there was, I don't know, one thing I wish for, and I use a lot in Scapel, is, and maybe this is a little bit of the human in the loop, the ability to add irrelevance to a graph, meaning I have all these concepts that are connected, like you just showed, but for whatever reason, I want to drag Ted Nelson hypertext ACM over in the corner and put a little mode around it. And it doesn't have to be, I don't want it to necessarily be an entity, it's an association, and that association might be as odd as like, these are tangential, these are offshoots, but to be able to take this space and put our own association into it, and then have that transfer into results, or like added, a little bit of added context, I think would be great. And that could go so far as, like, I'm seeing researcher and teacher up in the top right. Okay, so does that mean these are roles, these are examples, these are types? Well, okay, so maybe I can just clump those together as things that are professions. But then
look, this is, so just really quickly, because you're saying a lot of good stuff. Already in here, we can assign a citation, so that, let's say, paper. If I've discussed that in this paper, I can find something here that was the reason I had it, right? There's no reason why this only has to be plain text. You know, if you want to add categories in a more interesting way than just tags, like we did have ideas of this being able to be tagged as at least human, source, citation, document, whatever, organization, and concept. You know, all these things, there's nothing wrong with adding that. But it has to be more than just lots of tags at the bottom, and then you have a tag cloud. And I know that's where you're not going. You're not just going in the pile of buckets.
well, no, but that's good. That's similar. And it actually brings up a good point, because I think part of the problem we have with all this encoding is the feeling that, okay, if I'm going to put researcher, teacher, student, author together, I need to give that umbrella a name. And then what if tomorrow you want to give it a different name? You know, today you call it roles, tomorrow you call it types or careers. Well, let's get around that entirely. What if I could just clump them together and say, these are connected in a way, you know, and I don't have to give it a name. I just know that they're a bag of words.
Well, that's a joy of these sort of spatial layouts, because in a sense, just by putting them close to one another, which this is the thing I love about this sort of workspace. And, you know, there are all sorts of them around, but it is like sorting out the jigsaw. You just think, well, what I know at this point are these things and those things are somehow different. And that's all I need to know at this point. I don't need to put a label on it. I don't even need to draw a line around it. I just know that quite literally the distance, I'm just using as two-dimensional space to allow me to tease stuff out. And if I'm forced to put a label on it, now my concentration has been divided. I'm now basically putting effort into describing something that is, for my task, completely nugatory, and is just put more metadata into the system that I probably don't need. If I deliberately wanted to make an association, that's a different thing.
Yeah. So yes, okay. Ignoring you entirely, Mark, because you went on a different thing, just lovingly. One thing that Doug wanted, which I did test with him, I built it for him, was a color glossary. So we made it arbitrary human. We said technology words are yellow, human names are blue, organizations are whatever. No, there aren't that many colors we can easily tell apart, but we did a few, put lots of words in those categories. Of course, today it's much easier with entity recognition and all of that stuff. We then ran through his 62 paper, and it was amazing. Just by scrolling, you could see what sections discussed what kind of things. So I have absolutely no problem, even in this system, when you do a definition, to be able to say, this is a human, right? That kind of stuff is useful. Of course it is. It shouldn't intimidate the user, but like you said the other day, Alan, this is not exactly the best dialogue anyway, so we could make it better, no question. And then we could very easily have something at the bottom or the top that says, filter out by hiding all humans. So they will be half grayed out or deleted or whatever. Then we can start building what you're talking about, because these graphs have been around forever. The question is the usability. There's no actual high tech in making this happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
I think
if someone has $5,000 for me, I'll be happy to do that over the next month.
Right.
There's a chicken egg.
I'm only half
the
joking.
maps.
If I can get it,
Yeah.
maybe we can build that together. Yeah, sorry.
No, just think to what you were saying, Fred. I mean, the thing, ironically, about the maps is they're around, and you see them in court. Well, lots of people would look at this and would think that would have to be a product of its own, and it can't possibly be associated with a writing tool. My answer to that is, well, bunk, because that's a completely pointless delimitation. But I do think one problem with maps, and I'm reflecting on the 14, 15 odd years I've been supporting the Tinderbox tool, which has had this sort of mapping since the get-go, is actually how unskilled most people are in working it. Well, I won't get up. There are a number of reasons, and they differ in things. But my takeaway is, and it's nothing to do with the brightness or the intellect of the people doing it. It's that our interaction with these sort of tools are not nearly as poised as they are with writing text, for instance.
Yeah.
So part of our exploration problem here is we're having to bootstrap ourselves into it. Yes, these things have been around for a while. Have they actually been used in anger and depth? No, because what tends to happen is that things go off down the UX rabbit hole, and we've sort of discussed that the other day. So it has a slightly sexier look, or it has something. It has an extra thing, but what it doesn't have is people really engaging with this loose sort of graphing, which helps with the sort of edge that Alan was referring to just now about the fact that, graphs can somehow be too structured.
I'll just, this is my moonshot. This is the thing that I want to see. Copyright, Alan Laidlaw, whatever. The whiz bang that I would love to see if we had $10,000. We're looking at a graph, but for a moment, don't imagine that it's a graph anymore. Imagine it's a sculpture. And an anamorphic sculpture in particular. So when you walk around it, it starts to change shape. And how that would apply in a UI is, let's say you had a range slider at the top, and you start out with this default view, which is just you're messing around and things, right? But as you start to slide it, you could identify your XY axis if you want or not. But let's say that as you start to move around, it moves from the associations to like tangibles and intangibles, right? Things that are physical, either places or people versus concepts. And now all those things start to shift in the space, and you're doing this kind of like passive search, maybe even a nesting way between tangibles. You want to go people and things, and then people and time, right? And now you start to see these things float around the screen, but you get a sense of how they relate to each other, back to your old concepts. That's not the complete picture of the idea, but that's if we didn't think of it as a two-dimensional object like we default to, and instead, and not a three-dimensional like map of the world either, but there's an unexplored UX space that says, I can freely move stuff around on my canvas, but I can treat these views as if they are lenses or frames on the topic.
Yeah, but Alan, that is the premise of when this started out as a dynamic view. That was very much the premise, very, very related to that you could save views as well. So you could instantly flick between them.
Great.
And the problem has been very much, where do you get the data from, the metadata? So the stage we're in now, a little bit visual meta, but also the whole typing, so-and-so is so-and-so, right? To really make that dialogue pleasant, because we're not trying to build this for everybody. We're trying to build it for one user working alone and then sharing, right? So it's not a community in and of itself. So I'm thinking that if Adam wants to go through and add the birth dates of his children, fine, do that, and that should be understandable by the system. So if he wants to have a timeline view that has, the Prussian War, and then way over here his kids being born, absolutely fine. It has to be personal, right? And it has to be enjoyable to add this metadata. If it's not enjoyable to add it, no one's ever going to look at it. So I think we're aiming in exactly the right direction here.
I would agree. And I'd say the only challenge there is when you don't know what to call a thing or why you feel like these things are associated, then entering metadata immediately hits as a barrier, right? Versus a memory like what if you saved memory palaces, right? Like, hyper zoom plus Ted Nelson, and for whatever reason, this is something I want to explore, or there's something troubling. So I put it in that area called problems I have, versus, anyway. I guess what I'm trying to get at is how to enter metadata without it feeling like you're entering metadata.
Yeah, I got to go. I have family commitments, and I will be talking to Ted in about 2 hours, 1.5 hours. I may ask him something similar, but this is the problem we need to solve. And this is why I'm happy with the beginning of the, you're just writing. like that's the beginning. But I'm also very, very happy if we decide on better tokenization or relationships, as long as you don't open it up and it looks like flight controls, obviously, right? As long as you open it in a way that it feels like you're playing. This is your knowledge. You get to sculpt it, you know, and you get to do those views. Can we continue this on Monday? I think this is very, very worthwhile.
Sure.
And
I'll try and be there.
Brendan,
actually,
do
you guys want to talk a few more minutes? Because I have to run downstairs. Is that cool?
No, I
Should I
got
leave it
stuff.
open?
I have to jump.
Okay, lots of jumpers. Okay, has everyone got the thing?
Yes, thank you.
If not, send me an email if it didn't download properly. Okay, bye guys. Have a peaceful-ish weekend. Oh, sorry, I have to mention, I'm not here on Monday. We're flying to Cyprus. I completely forgot it was Monday. Sorry. Can we try to do it on Tuesday this time? Just a one-off? Or do we have
try?
to go
But I've got a
further ahead?
hackathon I'm going to be in.
I'm probably around. I mean, I should be able to.
Okay.
So it's better than Monday.
I could try later on Monday, but probably not.
Let's just figure it out over email. I don't know exactly what my Tuesday is going to be like, but it's supposed to be full of coding.
Yeah, we're okay. All right. Well, let's try it next Friday. If not, why don't whoever wants
Or
to meet
should
on
we?
Monday-
Is this room open, Frode? We could join in and request someone of us.
It's
records it and
open. You have joined before me before, but I'm not sure if
Yeah.
it's recorded then. So we have to make a decision how to deal with that if you end up running it.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. See y'all.
Sorry
Cool.
about that. Okay. See you soon. Bye guys. Bye.